Good. Okay. Oh, sorry. Hello.
Say something.
Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Yeah, good.
Now,
Yeah.
can you turn it off for a minute so we can talk? To wait.
What's that?
I have to wait. Handheld? Oh, they're testing, 1, 2, 3.
It's working well now.
It's live now, but you're going to.
What's up?
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ted Hull, and I'll be the host for this breakout session on human trafficking and victims, how they integrate into the church. Before I before I introduce our presenter, I want you to know this session is going to be live streamed on our YouTube channel, and please know that your image may appear on the live stream broadcast. And if you don't absorb all the content, and actually I've had a number of people who say they wish they were kind of split personalities so they could be at two different sessions, and these others will be recorded as well, and if you miss anything from this one, it too is being recorded. Out of respect for not only our speakers and presenters and the other guests, but also to spare your own embarrassment, we would invite you to mute your phones. I like that to be announced because that's usually something I forget. Our presenters are Joy Smith and Janet Campbell of the Joy Smith Foundation. Joy served as a Member of Parliament from 2004 until 2015 and member of the Manitoba Legislature for Fort Garry from 1999 until 2003, and served as a critic for justice, education, and intergovernmental and urban affairs. She's recognized as one of Canada's leading anti-human trafficking activists. Following her election in 2004, Mrs. Smith led the discussion on human trafficking at a national level, which resulted in important changes in the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act. Just as an insert, this is not on the script. I remember when Joy spoke here, I think maybe the first time at Mission Fest, and I remember her talking about the idea that all that human trafficking that happens in Winnipeg happens downtown, and she says it will be happening within a kilometer of this building. So I don't know if that was true, Joy, but I said it, so I heard it. In in 2011, she founded the Joy Smith Foundation, where she tirelessly works with and volunteers her time combating human trafficking and fighting for the rights of women in Canada and around the world. Janet Campbell brings a wealth of business experience and has directed growth in several organizations and successfully leading in complex environments. And so we welcome them both, and I would invite you to join me in giving them a warm Mission Fest Manitoba welcome.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah, it's live and well. Thank you for joining us today. And just before we started, we were praying that no weapon formed against us will prosper, because it's been quite a journey. Quite a journey. So the people here that are listening to the presentation today, I want to talk about the responsibility we have as Christians. Here at Mission Fest, I see a lot of faces. I recognize a lot of faces, a lot of people. And also within our midst, there'll always be someone who has a story about being trafficked. And there'll be someone that you're unaware of and don't even know, because that's what we find every time we speak about human trafficking. Next. They've asked me to say next every time I'm on the next slide. So, speak up for those who can't speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and the needy. You know, that's quite a statement, because my life, I wanted to be a principal of a school, and that's why I got a master's in mathematics and science and a couple of other degrees. I wanted to be a good principal of a school. But you know, God has different plans for our lives, and you sitting there today, you'd be surprised what some of those plans are going to be. I know I see your faces, and I think some of you think, it's going to be just fine. This is what I'm doing for the rest of my life. Well, my life was changed in a nanosecond. And that was the result of one of the students in my class who was trafficked, only I didn't know she was trafficked. She went out on the streets and never turned up at school. And, you know, everybody says kids are checked on and there's truancy stuff. Well, that doesn't really happen, because there's not enough resources to find the kids, number one, and get them back in school. But I found her, and she was on the streets of Winnipeg here. And she was turning tricks all the time. And I remember taking sandwiches and coffee to the girls, not only her, but to other girls on the streets. And they always told me that they couldn't go home, because I tried to get them home, and they said they couldn't go home because their managers were watching them. And I was thinking, managers? And I didn't know about human trafficking at that time. Today, we've worked over almost 8,000 files. 2 laws are passed that made Canadian history. I thank God for that. Today, because of that journey onto giving the sandwiches to my former student, one of the smartest girls I've ever taught, by the way, and listening to what the girls had to say about what was happening to them, I was really shaken when I said to them, well, report it to the police. I'll go with you and I'll help you. And I remember this girl saying, Mrs. Smith, we don't do that. We go into a court of law and they don't believe us anyway. And you know, I thought, well, I didn't call it human trafficking, I called it prostitution, but prostitution is not human trafficking. There's some overlap, but human trafficking is simply when someone is targeted and coerced into selling themselves for sex, and their managers or their traffickers get all the money. And it has been recorded by CSIS that, and it's more than that now, but 5 years ago, it was documented that traffickers make in excess of $280,000 per victim per year. That's why they do it. And guess what? It's not claimed on their income tax. I can tell you that. And they don't talk about what they're doing, and everybody thinks it doesn't happen. in their district. And everybody thinks, oh, it's those poor people on the street that, they've had a tough life. And, well, that's not true either. The majority of our victims of human trafficking are from middle class to upper class people. And guess what? We had to put together the Christian response to human trafficking, which is basically a Bible study, so Christians would become aware of how trafficking works within their churches. The title of what we're doing today is how churches should get involved. In the first place they should get involved is getting some knowledge about human trafficking and how it happens. Because more and more and more of our young people are being lured by traffickers, and more of our young people are being put into a form of hell on earth. Because how it happens is the traffickers come on as their friends. This is how it usually happens. You see, a kid is snatched and they're trafficked. Well, that happens sometimes. But the majority of it happens when it's the boyfriend or Romeo situation. And it can happen, girls can do it or boys can do it. Girls or men can be traffickers. One of our biggest cases here in Winnipeg happened in the middle of our city at a house where a woman sent her son, who was in grade 12, to psych out all the kids who were having a few troubles or talking to them, and saying, I don't like my home life, I don't like my parents, I don't like, they go through sometimes that stage where they pretty well don't like anything. And so they would glom onto those and say, hey, you can come and live at our house. You'll be able to have everything, and I can meet you some people where you can make some money. And some of them bought into it. And they went to this woman's house, and she was a trafficker, only she was the intermediate trafficker. She got the people, and then she phoned the trafficker and said, I got one, and then introduced them, and usually they became the girlfriend, and they were swept away all across Canada because they move them. They don't keep them in one place. They keep them in one place. There's trouble, then the cops can actually find them because the parents do report. And, it's an empty file because, there's not enough police officers. There's not enough social workers. There's not enough teachers who get involved to the well-being of their students, simply because after hours, they have to take care of their own families. So the reality is it takes a nation to stop human trafficking. Next, please. We had a recent case, very recent case, where a young man infiltrated a school. We've worked all these files, but we're all across Canada now, from coast to coast to coast. And soon you're going to hear about a big center opening that houses the education piece for people who need to get training in human trafficking, because now we train police officers. Just spoke to some a few minutes ago. We train judges, we train lawyers, we train first responders, you name it. But it's got very busy and very big, so we've had to put this center together. So that's all I'm going to say about it, because you're going to hear about it in the next year or two very succinctly about what's in that. And I thank God for the fact that He's always stayed with us, and our prayers go up every single day about no weapon being formed against us will prosper, and that He will give us the vision to what we need to do next. So I'm going to backtrack a little bit, because this is my family. And I had a miracle in my life, because I am an old lady. I'll be 77 later on this month. Whoa. But I got to tell you, senior citizens, your life doesn't end because you're 77. You know what? A lot of very famous people throughout history did their most productive work after the age of 65. I think you do most of your productive work when you turn your life to Christ and you pray every day for the Holy Spirit to give you the knowledge and wisdom, because we don't have it without that. And I tell you, one of our traffic victims who was trafficked for years, she had the most horrendous story, was baptized in my church 3 weeks ago. Isn't that great? Isn't that super? So you make a difference. Well, I know I left Parliament after 12 years, made 2 bills, Bill 268, mandatory minimums for traffickers of children 18 years and under. That's embedded in the criminal code. And I wasn't a minister, I was a backbencher. That wasn't me, that was God. And we had lots of opposition. You remember Susan, you were there with me praying all the time. And I never gave up. There's Susan Finley from Nation of Prayer. Welcome her to Winnipeg. She's from Toronto. And then my first bill was a little form of hell on earth trying to get it through, but read my book. You'll find out all about that, because I'm writing a book right now that my daughter made me write. She can be a bully, you know. She's right there, but she can be a bully. So anyway, having said that, I've started it. And I have flashbacks all the time, so I have to just hold the fort sometimes. There's a seat up here, right at the front. Hey, you know what? I was a teacher for 23 years. Someone comes in late, you get the front seat. So those bills were passed by the grace of God. Now, having said that, today, I had the miracle that I started to tell you about. And these beautiful faces on this, on the screen in my family. So as I'm getting older, I was praying to God. I said, you know, there has to be transition. I thought my foundation that had done all that stuff, you know, was so good, because when I left Parliament, I raised $100,000. There's a seat right up here, right? Should we tell them? Is that the front? Thank you for joining us. I don't mean to embarrass you. Well, I do, but it was fun. So, you know, when I left Parliament after 12 years, I thought I was done. I raised $100,000, and I gave it all to the survivors who were recovering their lives and who were starting their own businesses. So I felt pretty good about that. So I went home, only God had different ideas. And the survivors were, I said they were whining, but they weren't whining. They were just saying, Mrs. Smith, our voice is going to go away. You can't go away. But I had to. My husband had just recovered cancer, and he was diagnosed with Parkinson's. He needed me home. And so that's where I felt I had to be. When you agree, get behind me, people. So anyway, when some agree, some don't. You notice how faint that clap was? Anyway, when I got home, they moved me by all the emails that they sent me. And so what I did was start the Joyce Smith Foundation in 2011. It's a registered not-for-profit charity, because I wanted anyone who donated to it to have a receipt. So that's what I did. And then I hired one girl. I started in the basement of my house, and it grew and grew and grew and grew until we went to an office on Henderson Highway. And my friend Susan, my prayer partner, who's been my prayer partner for years, we prayed about everything, all the challenges along the way. So then I started getting older and older, and it seems you get older, it happens a little faster than it did when I was younger. So anyway, I got to be really concerned about it. And I said, God, you know, I really need your help here. If you want me to close the foundation, I will do that. If you don't want me to close the foundation, let me know who's going to take it over. Out of the blue one day, my daughter Janet. Now Janet, she's going to be up speaking in a little while. Oh, she's going to hate me for this, but I don't have to have lunch with her after. I'm having lunch with Susan, so we'll pray that down. She was senior vice president of a huge company, and this company took care of Canada and the United States. So one day she waltzes in and says, you know, Mom, I'm tired of making rich men and women richer. I want to do something very, very meaningful in my life. Janet is a Christian, and she just felt as if continuing on, like she was senior vice president of a huge company. I never thought, she was the last person I thought that would offer to take over. But the fact of the matter is, in fact, I didn't think really any of my family, I was looking far and wide for anybody that would be really interested in doing it. I just prayed about it, and this is what she did. She came in, and since she's been here, ladies and gentlemen, we have reached coast to coast. We are now all across Canada because of her work. If she hadn't come on board, but God knew that we needed her. So having said that, it's been a rough journey in many, many ways. We had to leave Henderson Highway because we were in the process here in Winnipeg of shutting down the licensing of body rub parlors. Can you go to the next one, please? I've lost my guy. Where is he? The next. Oh, there you go. Can you go on to the next one, please? You did. Oh, thank you. So those were the laws. I've told them all about them. So can you go to the next one, please? Education is our greatest weapon. Oh, well, that's just me in a presentation. Go to the next one, please. Okay. Luring is occurring within. Okay, great. Go to the next one, please. Okay. So I want you to pensively look at that. You all can read, I assume, so you can read all the stats. We have one of the greatest compilations of stats on human trafficking, both in Canada and the US, on the North American continent, and we're going to release that within the next year or two. It's the timing, and we want everything done properly. Because our stats come in every single day, we record them, and we know what goes on with that. Now, going back to my family, can we go back to that picture of my family, please? There we go. We have my daughter Janet, and then my granddaughter Kate. Kate has developed Luma and Bloom, which is a podcast that had, well, it had more hits than the National Post did, right? How many hits did it have when you first introduced it? Yeah, already high. So she doesn't have the stats right in front of her right now, but I remember the first day it was released, I couldn't believe it. We have chairs up here. Come and join us. Come on down. They're right here. And there's about 4 of them all in a row here if you want to have a seat. See, look at, give them a hand. Let's encourage them. I'm sorry, you're never going to come one of my sessions again, are you? No. So having said that, you know, here Janet came, and then Kate, who graduated and was a really good, she did very well in school. She wanted to join the police force. And then all of a sudden she came in and said, Grandma, I want to be a part of this too. And so now we have a whole team of people. It's not just our family, believe me, but the work has grown so exponentially that we've had to expand with many people that are working for us in different provinces. And we're so grateful that God has given us the vision to continue things and have a center right here in Manitoba that will be an education center and also house the victims of human trafficking that need that transition from being trafficked to actually going into the real community. And they don't do that until they're healed. So we've had quite a journey going on. So let's talk about the churches. I remember when I first introduced at a Bible study years ago, the Christian response to human trafficking. Do we have a copy of that? Okay, we have that at our table. And so we spent $40,000. We felt that we had to spend a lot of money at putting together a Bible study for Christian churches, because a lot of our people from Christian churches, our youth, were being lured. You see, during the pandemic, the traffickers know more about the internet than you and I do, and we keep up to it. We have experts who look after that all the time now for us. But I have to tell you that more and more we're being lured, and it's more and more boys too. So we had to transition into, very heavy internet and very heavy social media. We have a really good social media program that Kate heads up, and we keep track of absolutely everything. So we've grown in leaps and bounds. We've grown so fast that, we're running to keep up right now. But I started to tell you the story about a young man who infiltrated a school. And he was in grade 11 or 12, I forget which one. But he was part of a trafficking ring that nobody knew about. So he was just this new student to the school, and he did what he was supposed to do. He got to know a lot of these young girls and a lot of people in the school. He got their contact information, and he passed it on to the trafficking ring. And so the traffickers actually got online and actually contacted all these people. There are some more seats there, I think, if you want to go there. You don't have to really come to the front. There's some new people that just come in, okay? Welcome, by the way. All the front seats are taken because I had that invitation earlier. But he was a nice guy. He was a new student, very personable, and a lot of people gave him a lot of information. And as a result, in that school, the traffickers got a lot of their victims. Here in Manitoba, and I'm just going to end with this one so Janet can come up and continue in a minute. Here in Manitoba, I remember getting this email, and Madeline, who was someone we hired from the United Nations, she was with me for quite a few years. But I remember when she first got in my office, she said, I'm losing my microphone, can you hear me? When it first got in my office, she said, Mrs. Smith, we have this email, we'll get someone to come and go out there to this church. Now this church had 5 denominations. This church, I'll try the other ear, how's that? I have small ears and they have big microphones, so, can you hear me? Can I use this one, Ted? Oh, thank you. You're my best friend. Janet, do you want to take this and turn it off? Or give it to Ted? Okay, here we go. So Madeline got the email, and it was a short email, and they told me that they wanted a presentation on human trafficking, and they asked me if I could take the service that day. And they set it up kind of weirdly because they had everyone come in. Boy, everybody's standing at the back, and we do have some more chairs here. I want you to be comfortable. Come and join us. Nobody will encourage them to come and sit down. I just feel for them when they have to stand at the back. You can sit on the floor here, too. I've had that happen before. Okay. So anyway, I read the email, and it was a church in the middle of the prairie with trees around it. And they gave us the instructions how to get there. 5 denominations. And there was only about 50 people in the church and some little kids. So I said, I'm going out to this one. And Madeline said, oh, Mrs. Smith, you've got this and this, send somebody else. I said, no, I think I have to go out to this one. So anyway, all the way to where we were trying to find this place, you should have been in the car with us, my goodness. Ball Prairie, that clump of trees, this clump of trees, but this church is behind this clump of trees. We missed the driveway and found it eventually and set up our wares, and then I started the session on human trafficking. And this little 10-year-old girl raised her hand, and she started asking me questions after I gave my presentation, and the hair on the back of my neck actually started standing up. I just had a chill. And Madeline was beside, and she was new, but she was feeling the same thing I was. And so in between, after I gave the presentation on human trafficking, and then I was going to give the sermon that day, I said to her, Madeline, get a hold of that family. I want to talk to them, please. So afterwards, we sat down with that family, and that little girl told me all sorts of things. Somebody knew everything about the kids in that school. Somebody knew where everyone lived. Somebody knew what activities they went through. Somebody knew there was a coffee shop they congregated at. They knew everything. To make a long story short, this is Manitoba, folks. This is where you think it doesn't happen. To make a long story short, fortunately, at that time, my son was in the RCMP, so I was able to find out who was in charge of the area. But I'll tell you something, it was the Bible Belt here in our province. That's what I'll tell you. But then a 15-year-old girl tried to escape. She went through a window, and it was December. She fell off the roof, broke her back. And so what happened is we got her into a hospital, and the police officers were able to find out a lot of information about her. And to make a long story short, that one of the biggest trafficking rings was taken down that Manitoba ever had. And I thank the police for that. I thank for their, they're just so professional and so wonderful. We just need more of them. And we need more of them trained in human trafficking too, because they have so many things to deal with that they're specialists in human trafficking, but they don't all know about it, and they all should. Here in Manitoba, in the Bible Belt, we had another incident where there was a constable who came and knocked on my door and said, Mrs. Smith, I need some help. I have a traffic victim, and she was taken. And he lived in small town, southwestern Manitoba. He was a police officer there, and the chief there didn't really want to go into it because this doesn't happen in their town, right? So anyway, one day, they lived in a cul-de-sac, and one day the trafficker found this girl, broke down the door, raped her, took her. And to make a long story short, she was a girl from the US. So we found her because we have a lot of connections, We have a lot of connections, and it's like other traffic victims who know the system and are really an integral part of what we do in our office. They give us a lot of information. But anyway, we got her back, and she's now in rehabilitation. In the US, she was a US citizen. So I could tell you story after story after story, but dear people, you're going to hear from my daughter now, who is going to go through a lot of the things that have happened since she came on board, and that you can be a part of as well. So Janet, you want to come up now? Please give her a hand.
Okay, good morning, everybody. It's great to be here with you, and for anybody that knows, my mother will appreciate the fact that I was born on my toes, because I'm not quite sure what I could be asked to do. But we could be here for an entire week learning about human trafficking, and many of you may have some idea of what that is already, or a variety of different knowledge levels with human trafficking. So we won't get into that, but what I would like to do is share with you a broad public awareness campaign. So the Bible study that was created is because we do have many, many cases that happen in the Christian community. And for those cases that don't start in the Christian community, what we find is that for those individuals that have been affected by this very heinous crime, is that those individuals and their journey with faith is integral to their healing process. So it's important to understand that the Christian community has a very, very important role to play in our effort to combat human trafficking in the first place, but also to help those that have been impacted by this. We did launch, there's still a lot of people that don't know actually human trafficking, what it is. There's lots of people that don't think human trafficking actually happens here in Canada. There's lots of people that think it happens in other countries, which it does. There's lots of people that think that human trafficking happens in another community or to another family, and that is true. But Ted, who introduced us here today, talked about the fact that cases happen within a kilometer of where we're sitting right now. And sadly, that has become a reality that we see every day in our office, community after community. So the thing that we want is for all communities to really take an active role in combating human trafficking by being knowledgeable, by shining a light on the issue, and by engaging with us to mobilize so that your loved ones are protected. One of the things that we did was launch a campaign, a broad public awareness campaign, and it takes us through the signs of case after case after case, the things that we see. And when you see the signs individually, you might think, well, you know, I know somebody who may have a new friend or a new this, and so you learn that these signs are actually not as alarming as something that you would think is really an emergency, but when you start to understand the issue and pay attention to the signs, it starts to tell you a story, and then you can play a very active role in watching for your own loved ones and family members and your community. So we'll show a very short video here, if we can. Can we hear the sound? Maybe we won't watch the video, but you can go to traffingsigns.ca and you can access the video yourself and watch it. And in a minute, what you're going to see is a very real representation of what human trafficking looks like here in Canada and how it plays out. But in addition to that, at traffingsigns.ca, you can see 9 of the most common signs that we see and hear in all the cases that come through our office, and we've now dealt with over 7,000 cases. So let's go through some of those. I'll invite you to go to our website, traffingsigns.ca, and check that video out. And share it with your friends. But let's go to the next one, and let's go through some of the signs. Okay, so really quickly, let's go ahead. So really quickly, often the victims that we meet will have intersected with somebody new in their life. And as my mom talked about earlier, it's often a new romantic interest of sorts. And so when somebody is new and they're coming in as a romantic interest, that certainly is something to pay attention to. Carry on to the next one. As they engage with this new romantic interest, you may notice a very sudden change in the way they dress or how they do their makeup and how they represent themselves. That's another sign. One of the things that we see is frequent sleepovers. So many people may think that when you're trafficked, you're physically taken from one location to another. And that is true, that happens. It's a very transient crime, actually. It happens quite a lot. People may think that you get snatched. That's pretty rare, but it can happen. But actually, people are often surprised to learn that somebody can live at home and be trafficked. And that is the case. And so the case my mom touched on earlier about this young man that came into the high school, and he started to pass the information off to these traffickers. These girls lived at home throughout their trafficking ordeal, in fact. And so frequent sleepovers is one to really pay attention to. And so, sorry, I think you're trying to tell me something?
It was the first time I really felt special. We met online. He was older and gave me a gold necklace with my name on it. It felt so wonderful.
He told me we were gonna get married someday.
I started dressing the way he liked.
He bought me a second phone.
My grades started to drop.
He invited me to bars and clubs.
To hotels and motels.
I was coming home with cuts and bruises.
He forced me on dates with other men.
He showed me a lifeless body. I knew I'd be next if I tried to leave. I was just a kid. I couldn't see what was happening to me.
They worked hard to get that video going for us, so thank you very much. Appreciate that. So frequent sleepovers at a friend's house is something where it is used as a reason to get out of the house and go meet their trafficker and go to work, as it were. And so that is a sign that often comes up in the cases that we work on. New clothing, jewelry, gifts. The trafficker will shower their victim in love and affection and understanding and items. So they will give them often a necklace, very high-end things that maybe mom and dad can't afford to buy for them, and they think it's pretty great. Unexplained cuts or bruises. There's a lot of physical threats and intimidation that takes place in these cases. And so when somebody is experiencing that kind of thing, it's something to really pay attention to. And, you know, victims are very creative at justifying how it happened, like I got hurt at gym or something else. So that's to be. A new circle of friends or isolation. So once a trafficker moves in and they gain that trust and they make that connection, they will work to separate you from your supports. And so that is something that commonly happens. Change in attitude, it's pretty hard for your perspective not to change when that's what you're exposed to and that's what you're concealed. And so we often see these cases where these have been straight-A students. These have been kids that have been active in their church community, their school community, and suddenly they might be demonstrating what gets labeled as a bit of a rebellion, but something else could be going on. Grades are dropping, carry on. This sign here, the use of 2 cell phones in and of itself, is one of the signs that can stand alone. And when we go and we in-service in schools and teachers, it is amazing how many students get identified as having more than one phone. But that's something that is used as a means to keep track of and connect with their victims. So that kids don't need 2 cell phones. Adults sometimes do, right? Because we have a work one and we have a personal one, but kids, that would be a big red flag. So, for I know that this will turn out for my deliverance through your prayer and the supply of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, according to my earnest expectation and hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness as always. So now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and die is gain. And we'll go straight to this one as well. And when I came to you, brethren, I did not come with superiority of speech or of wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling, and my message and my preaching were not in persuasive words of wisdom, but in the demonstration of the Spirit and of the power, so that your faith would not rest on the wisdom of men, but on the power of God. So I think about this, focus of how church communities can really bring a lot of support and engage survivors. And I know that every day we try to walk in faith. There's a lot of times where we face some pretty big obstacles and problems. And we pray for wisdom and for help to guide us through. And we see miracle after miracle. And we try to live that out in the work that we do. And we find that often in these cases, the girls will come to us and say, well, if there was a God, why or how could this happen to me? And it's an opportunity as we live out our faith for them to have an opportunity to have exposure. And through that, it sets out a journey. Our church has been just amazing. Our church has been just amazing living out their faith. They work with us through Joy in Action events. They work in welcoming survivors into the church community and bringing them into small groups and just really integrating them in and having them be welcome and give them that opportunity to explore their faith. They've been wonderful. They help us with Christmas baskets for survivors at Christmas. And so it's really amazing to see the transformation of a girl who a year ago was in a psych ward because she was suicidal, to be going and being baptized in our church because of how, again, we live out our faith. And so I think that's really amazing. So if there's anything that you've heard today that perhaps inspires you, we really hope that the issue of human trafficking will also be on your hearts, and that you will join us and, commit to education, regardless of what your knowledge level is with human trafficking. Trust me, there is much more to know. After many, many years, I learn every day, and I know my mom will say the same. Get involved. We want to see every church come and join us with a team for Joy in Action. There is nothing better than mobilizing a community to raise and put a spotlight on the issue and to demonstrate to survivors that people really do care. So that's really amazing. We have lots of incredible resources. We are not-for-profit. All of the services we give to survivors every day is for free. All of the schools we go into, we do this for free. We never want there to be a financial barrier to somebody getting the knowledge or the support. So you can visit our website and check out, we have lots of great resources there for the Education Center, the Bible study. We have some Bible studies at our booth. We're in the main area off to the far end of the building. That's where you can find us. And a wonderful resource is Luma and Bloom, hosted by Kate and Nick. So Nick up there is one of the survivors that we've worked with, and she has an incredible testimony, grew up in a Christian home, and she will share her story on the podcast, Luma and Bloom. Her mom came and shared her testimony as a parent and what that was like. playing out, and they share that on the podcast. It's this tool is catching on in high schools, which I think is fabulous, and we have counselors that are giving this to clients to listen to. So it's very healing, and we get a lot of messages from our survivors every time an episode comes out about how much it helps them. So that's another free resource that's available to you. And I'm going to pass it back to my mom to give any final thoughts.
In closing, we'll be here at the front if anybody wants to talk to us after the presentation. And of course, thank you. The place is packed and some people, I'm sorry, you're sitting on the floor. But the fact of the matter is, one thing I would ask all of you to do for us and to put us on your prayer list. And pray, number one, for safety. And pray, number one, that we will be able to listen to the Holy Spirit and take action. Because this foundation came from a thought in Parliament to the basement of my house, to an office on Henderson Highway, and now we're down at the corner of Portage and Main. It's not an easy journey, and we need to pray that no weapon formed against us will prosper. We're about to go into a huge project of building in faith, more than in faith. We actually do have the finances now for it, but a big center to combat human trafficking, where it's the only one of its kind in Canada, where people can come and learn about human trafficking, and also a residence where the victims of human trafficking can stay, and some of them have children. We're going to have a chapel in there because our basis is we follow the Lord Jesus Christ and his teachings. And that's the basis. We don't apologize for it. Everybody knows who we are. We all survived, right? And we have the pleasure of leaving a lot of people to the Lord. So, in your hearts, take a look around your heart. And number one, if you could pray for us and get on the website, joysmithfoundation.com and trafficking.ca. And, as you do it, pray about it. We go through this life in a nanosecond, and we're with the Lord forever. And our faith is such a personal thing. We as Christians make judgments about other people. Well, guess what? I've seen the strongest Christians, after having come out of human trafficking in the most horrendous situations. We've dealt with Nygaard victims, which you will be familiar with because it's always in the news, but we have worked close to 8,000 files now, and about the families that walk or don't walk with the survivors. So there's a whole thing out there where it's a ministry that God has called us to, and I'm hoping in this room it's a ministry, a prayer ministry, first of all, for all of you. And secondly, if you need any help or anything, you know where to find us. We have a booth out there. And Janet and Kate, come up, please, because Kate is the brainchild of Luma and Bloom. And my goodness, do you know about podcasts? I never knew anything about podcasts. And she was telling me she's going to have a podcast. And I thought, well, okay. And so I go in, and there's a studio. And then they put me on the podcast and everybody else. But it's real world stuff, and that's become one of the most popular podcasts. So we as a family thank you for being here today. We ask protection around all our staff, everybody who works with us, so please pray for that very specifically, that no weapon will prosper against them. And I want to thank you for coming today and getting some knowledge about human trafficking. God bless you. Bye for now.
Thank you, Joy, for your response to the vision that God gave you, and for Janet, for Kate, and for so many others who are involved. We appreciate that. The words that came to my mind as you were wrapping up is, I am responsible. I can no longer, there's not one of us here today who is at least not more educated than we were when we came in. And even those signs of trafficking, yeah, I hear you, but that's going to happen in somebody else's neighborhood or somebody else's family. We need to recognize that that can happen not only in my neighborhood, but it can happen in my family. And to take note of those. And when you see, I think, Janet, you said, I think you were the one that said that second cell phone is a standalone. So thank you very much for coming. Thank you for coming. There's going to be another session here just in about half an hour. And they'll be here through half an hour and again at 4:45, and there'll be other venues as well. So thank you so much for coming, and we are grateful to you folks, and continue as well to pray that God will protect those who are involved in the Joy Smith Foundation and those who right today desperately need our prayers. Thank you.
Watch him work it for your good. He's not done with what he started. He's not done until it's good. Hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, hello hope, it's a new horizon. Hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, hello hope, it's a new horizon. If you're ready for a breakthrough, yeah, just open up and just receive. Yeah, 'cause what he's pouring out is nothing you ever seen. You ever seen. Hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, hello hope, it's a new horizon. Hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, hello hope, it's a new horizon. It's a new day. Fear is not my future, you are. Sickness is not my story, you are. You are. And heartbreak's not my home, you are. You are. Death is not the end, you are. You are. Fear is not my future, you are. You are. Sickness is not my story, you are. You are. You are. Heartbreak's not my home, you are. You are. Death is not the end, Jesus, you are. You are. So hello peace, hello joy, hello love, that's a new day. Hello strength, hello hope, it's a new horizon. The sun is coming up. Hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, hello hope, it's a new horizon. Fear is not my future, you are. You are. Sickness is not my story, you are. You are. Heartbreak's not my home, you are. You are. Death is not the end, Jesus, you are. I just want to speak the name of Jesus over every heart and every mind. 'Cause I know there is peace within your presence. I speak Jesus. I just want to speak the name of Jesus till every dark addiction starts to break, declaring there is hope and there is freedom. I speak Jesus.
Your